Well, I think we're ready to get started for the deep dive this morning. I want to say welcome to everybody joining. I was just watching on Facebook. We've got a lot of folks already on from all over the country. It's always so good to see everybody on Monday morning, starting off with the deep dive. Let us know where you're watching from if you haven't done that yet. Scott, see you there in Destin. Always so good to have you on. And Rick, see you there in Florida. Ken, so many folks joining right now for the deep dive. It's October 28th. Gosh, wrapping up October here. A couple of months left in the year, an election next week, the Fed meeting next week. There is a lot to talk about in real estate right now. Kim, see you there in Greenville, and Gail and Greg and Charleston. So good to see everybody this morning. And thank you for joining the deep dive. I was in Tennessee on Friday, and somebody had mentioned something about the deep dive and what we're doing. It's so good to see folks when we get a chance to do that as we're out and about. But listen, there is a lot to talk about, and what we're going to do this morning is we're going to talk about the election. And the KCM research team has done a phenomenal job over the last several months. Gosh, we started this however many months ago, talking about how does the market how is it affected by the election cycle. And now we're coming through that. Election is next week. If you didn't know that, it's coming up. And what we want to do today on the deep dive is take a look at what we said, and then how is that affecting the market right now. And even I think over the next week, give you some information that you can be out talking about this to folks that are wondering sort of how are things going given the election. And so I'm going to give all that to you this morning. You'll be well equipped to have great conversations, because I always think about this as things come up. You're going to answer it either with we'll have to wait and see, or I don't know, or some sort of unsure answer, or you can say I can show you exactly how things are happening in our market right now. So we're going to do that this morning. And again, just a huge shout out to our KCM research team for all the hard work they've done this year on the election to give all of us what we need to be sort of eloquent and certain of what's happening. So how is this election affecting the housing market? That's the question right now. And I'm going to take each one of the pieces that we've talked about, and then we're going to look at what's happening in the market right now. We do the deep dive every week, and we exist really as keeping current matters, believing that most agents out in the market know what's happening. The good ones sort of understand what's happening, but only great agents can explain what's happening in this market. And I think everybody listening to the deep dive this morning, whether you're listening to it live or through a replay, being able to explain this and have a relevant market opinion based upon the facts of exactly what's happening is key in today's market. So the first question that we sort of put on the table, maybe even 4 or 5 months ago, is how does the election slow down the housing market, or does it slow down the housing market? There are several things that, if you remember this, that sort of affect people and sort of the psychology of an election, which is uncertainty. That's just, I don't know who's going to be elected. I'm uncertain about the direction of our country, depending on who gets elected. That plays huge into people's decisions and sort of their some fears maybe. Second are the policy expectations. And right, if the individual that I'm voting for is elected in, I believe they're going to make policy decisions that are better. That's why I'm voting for that person, which ultimately leads to consumer confidence, right? If I believe we're heading in the right direction, I'm more apt to buy a home. I'm more apt to do something like that. And I've always mentioned the University of Michigan study where they went back and looked at election cycles. They did this in 2020, 4 years ago, where if you live in a county that is the same political affiliation as who is elected in the White House, you'll see more permits and more starts in housing in the next 4 years in that county. And that makes sense, right? We believe that we're heading in the right direction. We believe that things are on the right track. But if we sort of take a step back and we say, okay, what happens in an election year relative to the velocity of transactions? It's this right here. Maybe you remember this slide, that in a non-election year, the gray bar there, October to November, sales dropped 9.8%. That's normal seasonality in the real estate business? Well, in an election year, you see the red bar. This is going all the way back to the 60s. On average, transactions have fallen about 15%. So, transactions slow down just a little bit more as people say, we'll wait and see. I'll sort of put my hands in my pocket and I'll just wait. I want to see how this thing's going to turn out. Well, how is that affecting the market right now? And I would say in any market, everybody that's watching right now, understanding, are things slowing down? Are they not slowing down in your market? And you can even comment here. I'd love to hear from folks. I'm just looking at folks on right now. What are you seeing in your market relative to, do you feel like this is real? Do you feel like people are sort of going, hey, we'll wait and see? Well, Redfin just did a study saying that 23% of first-time home buyers are likely to purchase their first home in the next year. They said they're waiting till after the election. So 23% saying, you know what, we're going to wait. So I think it is real there. I think there's a couple of things. Robin, I see their market is stagnant. Simone, slow. Yeah, certainly what you're seeing in your market is helpful to everybody. So I would add that in there to the comments. But this is real. I've oftentimes referenced as well the Bright MLS study that says that 70% of buyers over the last year abandoned their search because of price, right? So we know that there are people that over the last year that have abandoned because of just strictly the cost of it. We know right now people are kind of going, okay, let's wait and see. And so it's very, very real. I see folks, Mike says, does the election slump start to recover in December, or does it take a bit longer for buyers to jump back in the market? Great question. I think typically we'll talk about sales here in just a minute, Mike, but I think it traditionally probably December in our business, with holidays and everything as we kind of tail out the end of the year is slower, but I think it starts to come back certainly as we get into January. But I don't know that the slowdown in December is any more than what's seasonally happening. But we know that's happening right now. Most markets, most of the comments that I can see as I kind of scroll through here say that I feel a slowdown. I feel a little bit, and I think that's legitimate. I think this is content right now. Certainly, if you have a listing that I would be talking to my sellers about. And we recorded a reel that'll come out on this topic, on people that are wondering. Probably the number one question I'm getting right now is, should I do a price reduction right now? And that reel will cover that answer. But let's go to the next question. Do more homes sell after an election? That's sort of the premise that we began a lot of this research on. Our team went out and went all the way back to the 80s, and home sales went up after 9 of the last presidential elections. So the year of the election, then the year following, we sold more homes 9 out of 11 times. Okay, so what's the forecast for next year? Well, they're starting to come out right now. This is the average of forecasters. We're projected to sell somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.6 million homes in this country. That's existing homes, which came out last week incredibly low, and new homes. That's total home sales, and then projected to grow next year. So if these projections and forecasts hold, that will certainly be true. So 9 out of 11 times we've sold more homes the following year. That is forecasted to happen going into next year, and there are a lot of reasons for that. One, the Redfin study that I said 23% of first-time buyers are like, we're going to wait. I talked about the price piece. And oh, by the way, mortgage rates are forecasted to come down in the next year. We're certainly in a volatile time right now, no denying that. But the forecast is still that they will continue to come down going into the new year. So what happens to prices after an election? If you remember that, we talked about the slowdown, we talked about transactions, but what about prices? A great quote here: election years can bring more volatility to prices and rates than in non-election years. However, those moments of volatility are fleeting. I talked a lot about the election over the last several months, and the truth is there's not a tremendous impact to real estate in the election. A little bit of slowdown, but we've always given the analogy, we don't lose those transactions, they just get delayed. But this question of price and how does that sort of shape up? I'll remind you of what we said. Existing home prices went up after 7 of the last presidential elections. The one outlier is 2008, and We know the story of that market, rough market relative to home sales, home prices, all of that. But we know typically what happens is homes go up the year following an election. We can say that confidently based on this information of the last 8 elections. New home prices, we have more information here going all the way back to the 80s. And the one exception, 2008, but every year other than that, the year after an election, home prices have gone up. So if we sort of test this again to what are forecasts for next year, these are the most up-to-date, and shout out to Alex and Jamie just updating this with the most recent price information. So these are the most recent forecasts for 2025. And you see the average being 2.5%, but the lion's share of these forecasters are somewhere between 3 and 4%, very normal, very average price appreciation going into next year. So prices will go up going into next year. I'm going to talk about the mortgage rate scenario here in just a minute, because that's probably one of the most volatile ones. And that was the question that came up on Friday was, hey, what is the sort of outlook for mortgage rates? And I'll tell you what I told them. But I want to give you one thing. If you grab your phone real quick, I want to give you a QR code that you can participate in a survey that we are doing. We do on a regular basis with John Burns Consulting. John Burns Consulting, probably one of the best out there that does a lot of work really understanding with builders and with other audiences what is happening in this market. We publish a lot of the research that they find. But if you'll scan that QR code, you can be involved in some of these surveys that are getting opinions of agents, people in the business of what are you seeing right now, which helps tremendously as we build a lot of content, certainly will as we go into 2025, understanding exactly what's happening so we can give you sort of the feedback of this is everything we're hearing so that you can be the most knowledgeable professional on these topics. But scan that if you haven't. It'll be in the deck if you're a KCM member so that we can continue to get your feedback. That'd be tremendously helpful. So what happens to mortgage rates in an election year? If you remember that topic, this is the one that I always joke around and say it's the area to get some conspiracy theory people fired up on. Is there influence in the economy and certainly in the housing market relative to mortgage rates in sort of the past? And this is what has happened typically. Mortgage rates have typically declined leading up to a presidential election. You see, there have been, if you go all the way back to the 80s, in the overwhelming number of times rates have come down. There have been 3 instances where they've gone up. Now, I personally don't believe there is a correlation between how rates sort of operate and the election. Some people do. But, if we look at, this is July to November on election years, again, going back to the 80s, where were we in July this year? 6.85. I took a peek at Mortgage News Daily. I think we're hovering in that range right now, because we sort of were on the downslide, and the last couple of weeks have been tremendously volatile. Now, let me say this about, the last couple of weeks. We've got a lot going on. We've got an election next week. The Fed is meeting next week. The sort of trajectory of mortgage rates will be based upon incoming data on inflation, on jobs, on the overall economy. I think the Wall Street consensus right now is that the Fed will take action and cut the Fed funds rate again next week. Now, that's not mortgage rates, but we'll wait and see what happens there. But the overall trajectory from last year is that rates have come down. At the end of October last year, rates peaked at almost 8%. And now we sit in this, knocking on the door of 7, no doubt about that. But I do believe, as I look at forecasters, and I've shared a lot of those forecasts on the deep dive, that we are in this downward trending, sort of path in the next 6 to 12 months. The question came up on Friday, I mentioned, and I said, the one thing that I'll guarantee is you could try to predict or forecast mortgage rates, you will be wrong. It will not be a direct straight line. But I think most of the volatility we're seeing right now is a byproduct of the election, is a byproduct of the Fed meeting, is a byproduct of uncertainty in the economy. So a couple of things to wrap up here. Lisa Sturdivant does a phenomenal job at Bright MLS. Historically, the housing market doesn't tend to look very different in presidential election years compared to other years. It's really about demographics and the economy. I think no doubt we'll get through this. Someone will be elected next week, and we'll get through all the uncertainty and sort of focus in on what we need to do, which is get the facts out in the market and help buyers and sellers make the best decisions of their life. And I'll sort of wrap up on this. Winston Churchill said, "The price of greatness is responsibility." So now you have it. Now you have everything that has sort of happened in the past relative to an election year. You have what's happening this year. Our job is to be responsible, to get things out in the market so that buyers and sellers can make the best decision for them and their family. I always say it, if you were here in Richmond, Virginia, at our KCM office, there's a wall that says, "We believe every family should feel confident when buying and selling a home." And that's what drives the work of our entire team, is to give you everything you need to feel confident helping people make a confident decision. We always want to give you things to share, and our team works diligently to that, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a social post, whether it's a script in Real Talk. If you're not a KCM member, I would encourage you, as we wrap up the year, start a free trial. Check it out. Get the information you need so that you can be the knowledge broker to the clients you serve. I'll wrap up on that. We will have all of this stuff ready for you. You can go in and grab all these slides if you're a KCM member. Get this information about the election out, because I believe it'll be questions that people will wonder about and will ask in this coming week as we get closer to the election. So hope you have a wonderful Monday. Great start to this week, and we'll see you back again next week on the Deep Dive.